Thanks everybody for joining another monthly customer mastermind. And today we're going to be talking about Clubhouse. Our team, namely James and Dan, wherever they are on your screen from me, have been going all in doing a daily room, Monday through Friday, the marketing at noon room on Clubhouse. And we've been experimenting with some things, especially as it relates to Clubhouse plus your podcast. So we wanted to break down some of those. So James, Dan, whoever wants to take this first one, do you guys want to give a preface to anybody who's still somewhat new to what is Clubhouse, and why have we been getting active there?
Yeah, so Clubhouse is essentially an audio chat room, I guess is how you would call it. And so for anybody not familiar with it, I'm really excited about it because it's giving podcasters a level of engagement that we've never had before. Like being behind the mic, our audience is they're listening, but they can't talk back just because of the nature of the podcasting platform. And what I love so much about Clubhouse is it allows us a forum to actually have two-way conversations with our audience instead of what has traditionally just been a one-way conversation. And so I was really excited about it when it first started hitting everybody's radar at the end of last year. And we decided this month in March to go all in on it and see the kind of traction that we saw. So that's at a high level what it is. Right now it's only on iPhones. So if there's still a lot of people that can't join just because they're on an Android device. You can get to it from an iPad as well, but it's still in some sort of beta. It's also invite only. And so what I've found is if you just sign up for the platform, it's mature enough now where there's likely a few people that are already in your contacts list that are in the app. And as soon as the app detects that they've got a contact that is on the wait list or that has signed up, they will send them an in-app notification and say, hey, you can let this person in, and it doesn't burn one of their invites. So they usually release about 3 invites a week to all existing users of the app, and they can either use that invite, which happens via text message, or you can just sign up for the platform and it will ping somebody in your contacts list that's already in the app, and they can just let you in the wait list. I think it took like maybe 15 minutes for somebody to let me in. So those are the 2 ways that you can get in, be invited or just sign up, and more than likely somebody that already knows you is going to let you in.
Yeah. Dan, you and I were talking about this the other day. With any new platform, any new social media, there's always this question, right? Is this a passing fad or is this a building trend? And I think it's way too early to make that call with Clubhouse. But as you and I were talking about it, you kind of laid out, well, here's why we're going after Clubhouse right now, based on, even though we don't know which direction it's going to go. Do you want to talk a little bit about the opportunity there, man?
Yeah, man. So there's kind of 2 ways I assess like new social media apps. One is to assess like, do you have time to look into something new, or do you just need to double down on the few that you need to do well with? So there's kind of that assessment. You also have to assess like, how well does this fit into what we're currently doing, which is right now we are trying to double down on just a few channels, but I'm like, this fits so closely with podcasting for us that it just kind of made sense. As to whether it's like a growing trend or just a passing fad, who knows? You really don't know. But I know because it's so close to what we're specialized with in podcasting and audio only, I was like, ooh, it's too tempting to just at least experiment with, because people are going to have questions for us, even customers, to know how to handle Clubhouse. So we've been experimenting with it heavily. And if it's a fad, then great. We get a little blip on the radar. I get to learn something new. Oftentimes big fads like this turn into trends, but play out differently, like Vine did, right? Vine became a quick fad, but that kind of changed the way we made content. It panned out into stories, it's panning out into TikTok. It was a precursor. So even if it's just a fad, you don't have to consider it a loss to have put in a lot of time there, knowing that you've built a skill set that's probably going to be like that's going to continue on somewhere. And you could just to capitalize on a little bit of the hype, it's worth it for that. If it's a trend, then it's kind of worth it to be early on the trend. It's worth it to put in the extra effort, because we all know that being early on platforms can make a big difference. But it's still not worth chasing every single trend that could potentially be a thing. And that's where most companies get in trouble, with trying to chase down too many channels at a time instead of doubling down on the ones. If this is something that kind of fits in your wheelhouse, then it makes sense. It's also kind of a way you can also like double dip it with your podcast and put in just a little extra effort and get 2 channels. So that's kind of what we're doing currently.
Yeah. And that's one of the things we're going to touch on in a bit, is tactically, how can you develop your Clubhouse strategy, start hosting chats on Clubhouse, and then record those and double dip, as Dan was talking about, and create content, extra content for your podcast as well. One of the things that like came to mind for me, because I was kind of later stages than the rest of our team in getting on Clubhouse and getting active. James was joking, I was ghost profile dude for a while. Is that, it kind of seemed to me like, well, you could just host a Zoom meeting. Like over this past year, like happy hours on Zoom got really popular, very easy to hop in. This is very similar, but it's audio only. So like, what's the difference? What's the appeal? And I started to hear people say, well, I could just join in while I'm cooking or while I'm walking the dog, which I normally wouldn't do. Like you can do on Zoom. Like obviously Zoom has a mobile app, but I rarely ever use the Zoom mobile app. And I hear the same thing from other people that, hey, I'm not going to be, on a Zoom call, webinar, or something like that while I'm out walking and those sorts of things. James, what's been your experience? What have you heard from people that are joining our rooms? Is it kind of similar, like the similar advantages to why a podcast versus a webinar, because it's audio only?
Yeah, I think the passive consumption of it, the default to, or not the default, I mean, it's the only option is audio. So you don't have to dance around like, oh, I need to have a great background, or I need to be seen as like I've got my stuff together, because there's no option for video. So I've heard a lot of people say that they're just a lot more comfortable on an audio only platform. And I think, I mean, Clubhouse was just built to access mobile. I mean, Zoom's got a good app. I use the Zoom mobile app a lot more than I think you and Dan do, but it's still not ideal. And the functionality of Clubhouse I really like. It's very easy to bring people up on stage, have them ask a question, and send them back down to the audience, so that you can kind of be in control of the conversation. Obviously, you can do that, with Zoom, by muting people that are that you're not wanting to talk. But I don't know. I just find that the interface of Clubhouse is really clean. I've heard a lot of people hate on it, but I think it's I think it's really sharp, and I think it's really frictionless. I think it's really simple to use.
I mean, it's just way more accessible. Like even for this meeting, I had to find a quiet room with good Wi-Fi that I could just now focus. So imagine if I'm like walking around with my laptop. Luckily, I have a laptop, and just like, this would be weird. This is weird for a Zoom meeting. I'm like walking around, but a Clubhouse, nobody would even know, right? It's kind of like, it's just so much more accessible. I could be that by the hotel pool and be on Clubhouse and consuming and just kind of jump in for a question or here or there. But with Zoom, it's almost like a dedicated space. So it's just harder. It's hard to do that via Zoom.
Yeah, I found myself just in similar times where I'm like, oh, I just queue up a podcast. Since I have started to consume some more content on Clubhouse, just, hey, I'm gonna pull up Clubhouse and see what's going on. Now there's still a long way to go for Clubhouse to go on content discovery. James, do you want to just walk through before we get into, okay, how you can do Clubhouse, what we're doing, and how you can use it in tandem with your podcast, just some of the common terms that we're going to talk about as we talk about the tactics. We got clubs, rooms, pinging people, the hallway, maybe just unpack some of those, and then we'll get into what we've been doing and what we'd recommend if it seems like it's fitting with your podcast strategy.
Yeah. So a room on Clubhouse is essentially where all the magic happens. It's where it's the space that you create to have the conversation. And so that's the bulk of where you'll probably be spending your time in the Clubhouse app, is actually in a room, whether you're creating a room to facilitate a conversation with one of your guests or somebody else that you want to create content with, or it's a room that you're consuming content in. Clubs it's actually relatively new, because they're open to everyone now. When I first got on the app a couple months ago, clubs were these things that everybody didn't have access to. And so it was tough. But in the last, I think, couple weeks, they have opened up to where anybody can start a club. So we started the B2B Growth Club. I think it's got, I think it's ranking for the word B2B right now. So in a very similar way to naming your podcast around discoverability and how you want people to find your show, like Troy, having, the higher ed in the name of the show is going to help Troy's podcast get found in podcast platforms. In the same way, if you decide to start a club on Clubhouse, right now is the time where naming it well is going to allow you to capitalize on the early traction that the app is getting. Because I can see our followers for that club is increasing at a much higher tick than even my personal following. And I'm sure it's because people are searching B2B or B2B marketing, finding our club and following it. So a club, you can invite members to the club. So if you've got other people on your team, or you want to invite other people to be able to host rooms within your club, it can, the more people obviously hosting rooms in your club, the more exposure your club is going to get, and the more people are going to follow your club. So I think we've got like 75 members or something. I invited a lot of people that I follow on the platform to be a member of B2B Growth. They accepted, and now they can host rooms in the B2B Growth Club. So that's what a club is. When we refer to being on stage, so any co-host of a room defaults to being on stage, meaning the rest of the room can hear them present or talk or have a conversation. The rest of the people that join the room, it defaults to putting you into the audience. And so at any time, you can raise your hand if you've got a question or you want to engage in the conversation, and one of the moderators can choose to bring you on stage, or they just ignore you and you stay in the audience. So that's how the platform works in that regard. I heard Logan mention the hallway. So the hallway is essentially the news feed for Clubhouse. So the hallway is where you're going to see it's really discoverability for finding rooms that would be interesting for, different kinds of content that you want to consume. I have not found the hallway to be particularly helpful on Clubhouse. It doesn't deliver up content to me that I'm very interested in. It's a lot of kind of slimy, get rich quick, millionaire habit kind of stuff that, I don't know, to me is I'm not a huge fan of. But sorry if that's offensive to, I'm sure a lot of people are, because there are hundreds and hundreds of people that join these rooms. So I might be in the minority when I'm not, when I say that I'm not super attracted to those kind of rooms. But I think Clubhouse is still very early with their algorithm and figuring out what each of their users likes, because they clearly don't know what I like. But so I don't spend a lot of time in the hallway. But I have found a few rooms. There have been some rooms on entrepreneurship from some like billion-dollar CEOs that have been fascinating. And so on occasion, you can find a good room in the hallway. And then Logan also mentioned the term ping. So when you're hosting or moderating a room, you can, in the bottom of the app, you can ping people into the room, which basically sends them either an in-app notification or it will prompt you to send them a text message that invites them into the room. And so anytime Dan and I start a Marketing at Noon room, one of us in the beginning part of the call, we'll go in and we'll ping the different people that we follow or that follow us that we think would be interested in the conversation. And it can get you a little bit of traction for folks that, otherwise weren't in the app or didn't get notified that there was a room happening. So those are some terms.
Love it, man. I've also I found one just randomly, just on public speaking and presenting, that was really, really good the other day. So there definitely can be, some stuff you can find just searching around. But let's get into, the main thing we wanted to cover today is like, how do you get started? How do you set up the structure? How do you execute on having a regular room and hosting rooms, building your club on Clubhouse? So Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about what was our premise, what was our strategy in, naming the room, timing, frequency, format, those sorts of things? I'm going to let you take the stage, and I'll be off for just a minute on video. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Awesome. So James and I were definitely kicking around different ideas for the premise for Clubhouse. James was kicking around like, oh, let's make it the same time every day. And I remember like one of the main premises you can take with any content platform is owning a specific time of day, or a specific day of the week, or a specific day of the month. It's kind of an easy way you could just own something and make it memorable. Like Moz did this with Whiteboard Fridays. If you're in the marketing space and you're used to listening to Rand Fishkin, like you knew he was dropping a new video every Friday. If you're into SEO, he owned Friday. And many other people can. Morning Brew owns morning, right? You're waking up and read your newspaper or your marketing feed every morning. So
Marketing over coffee podcast. Yeah.
Yep. So it's an easy way to just kind of differentiate your content feed. And so with Clubhouse, we approached like, well, we're talking to executives or talking to busy marketing people. Let's do it at lunchtime because they can tune in real quick for part of their lunch. And then we were just, oh, sorry, I'm getting music from outside the room. I was like, what's going on? So we just decided to own noon. And I was like, well, it's lunchtime in a room. It's noon room. It's just kind of stuck. We're like, oh, we're talking about marketing at noon, and it's in a Clubhouse room. So that's just kind of how the name got thrown together. But ultimately it came around the premise of trying to own a day part so that we get into the routine. So people know that like, hey, at noon Eastern time, every single day, this becomes a habit, something they can get into, and kind of expect that, hey, if they show up at Clubhouse at this time, it's going to be happening, which I think works well considering Clubhouse is always live, which is why TV series, like even, I don't know if anybody's like actually watching shows on TV and not on demand these days. I don't know if anybody actually does that. Like they had to put it at the same time every week in order for you to expect like, oh, I'm going to watch my thing on Tuesday at 7, right? It's the same time every time. So when you have a specific time, like you do at Clubhouse, it's best to actually own a specific part, either a specific time of day or a specific day of the week. I think helps with Clubhouse a lot since it's consistently live. It's also just nice in that while it's kind of hard technically to record, it's nice that you can double dip the content as a podcast. You can record the room provided that you get everyone who speaks permission to be recorded. You can actually get that recording and republish it as a podcast, so that even if only a few people show up, which we've certainly had some rooms where we only have 1 or 2 at the minimum, but most of the time there's like about a dozen or maybe 18, 20 different people in our rooms. It's just a great way to essentially get the most out of Clubhouse and then get a little extra out of it. Even if people don't show up to it, it's still a great platform to record and then just use it for the podcast. And then it's content you can leverage elsewhere.
Can you walk through real quick, since you just mentioned that, Dan, how you figured out how to record? That part has been, it was a nightmare trying to figure it out, but since you figured it out, I want to make sure we share that with everybody.
I will say that the route I took is fairly technical. Like it took some hardware equipment actually to do it. I've seen other people use hardware before. And I think there's an easier version of it that it's not quite as clean, but it'll still work. But it essentially requires having to have 2 different smartphones. So that's like the biggest drawback that I'm using right now. I have to go steal my wife's smartphone every single time. And I still need to find a better way because I can't keep stealing her smartphone at noon every day. But right now I grab her smartphone. I use mine to record with, and then I bring her in as a separate participant into the room. The hard part is it's hard to, record and have it capture audio at the same time. The iPhone just wants to do one or the other. And you can't record just using the same screen recording software on the iPhone or Android device. The app is built to like turn it off. So if you try to record it, if you've tried this already, you know, like it not only flashes red, it literally turns off the recording app on your phone, or at least the screen record. So I actually plug my wife's phone directly. I use the little adapter lightning cable to a microphone, a headphone jack, and then run it into a switcher board that I run into as a webcam into my computer. And then I record essentially a webcam feed from the switcher board right to Loom to capture the audio, which is kind of like multiple steps in order to get audio, but that's what I'm currently doing. A shortcut away around this is to just use a voice recording app. So like the Memo app, and just have the Clubhouse on, but then you have to have it on and it needs to be in a quiet room by itself because it's recording from the microphone. It's kind of a weird way to capture the audio, but it does work. Multiple people do this, but again, it's hard to record both the room and record yourself at the same time. So you still need a separate phone. At least every time I've tested it on my phone, it has not gone well. I need a separate phone every time. It's cleaner to bring it in via headphone jack if you can have either a switchboard, and there's also, for the podcast community, there's like Rode has made like audio podcasting boards where you can control audio levels and stuff. So the most sophisticated podcasters have hardware pieces like that. And there's ways to do it with that. Otherwise, just using a separate phone from the one you might be talking into is the best way I found out. So you might have to have another teammate just jump on and just be a passive listener and recording. Is a way to do it. I'm still researching. I'm still trying to figure out better ways to record it. And hopefully it would be nice if they just let you record it like locally on the app, but who knows? They might just keep that as a differentiator and never do that.
Yeah.
But it is legally, like in their terms of service, they do let you record. I've had multiple people give me pushback on LinkedIn saying, you can't record. It's against their terms of service. I've read like the whole section of it, looking very carefully at the legalese they've printed. And it does not say you can't record. It just says you have to get permission from everybody who speaks.
Yeah. So talk about that, Dan. So the two easiest options right now are have another phone or someone else in the voice memo app, so that you can hear, you know, the person who's joining from the first phone, and you can hear the audio from Clubhouse just adjacent from the other phone, or plug that into a switcher and do a screen recording. But you also need to confirm consent from everybody who speaks. Yep. Talk about how we do that right now.
Yep. The way I read the terms of service, and this is getting into legal advice, and I am not a lawyer, and I am not your lawyer. So this is just this is my interpretation of the terms of service. So you have to go to your own lawyer.
Insert legal disclaimer here.
Yeah, right. But the way it says it, and I've heard a lot of James and I think bloggers are saying like, oh, you just need to put the little recording icon there. But it says explicitly that it needs permission from every speaker. So I'm like, well, there's nothing more explicit than asking them, do we have permission to record your voice, to record the session with you in it? And they say yes, then that's pretty explicit permission. So that's probably the most conservative way you could do it and be okay. And it's honestly not that hard. As soon as they get up, be like, oh, before we record, do we have permission to record your voice? They always say yes. They're they're getting up on stage to be and the part of it, at least the appeal for us, is that they're going to be on the podcast. So they never say no. Otherwise you'd have to just edit that in post-production, edit it out.
And on it, I'll just be, honest, before we figured out the recording piece of this, before Dan figured it out, because I definitely I was throwing my head through a wall trying to think about how to figure it out. And if it weren't for Dan, I probably wouldn't be doing Clubhouse, because it was very, it's just like with any platform, right? Like when you only have, 7 or 8 people show up to a room, especially when you know that you're getting, a lot of you on this call, hundreds of listeners to your podcast. It's like, oh man, this is like deflating to be in this room and only have, 5 or 6 people in this room. But as soon as we figured out how to record, to me, it was just like, this is just a mechanism to create content that I knew I was going to have to create anyway for my show. So this is just allowing me to create more content content for the podcast, and another way of being able to interact with our potential customers. So when we ask potential customers to be a guest on B2B Growth, we can now, if they have an iPhone, we can invite them to be a co-host of Clubhouse. So it's this new thing, and it adds relational depth to the relationship, because now we're doing a Clubhouse. They can answer questions from the audience, and we can also put it on B2B Growth. So for me, that was a big mental switch, and why I was so on board with continuing to do Clubhouse, because I know that it's feeding this thing that we're already dedicated to doing.
It's awesome, man. So and the other thing I would add is going back to what James said at the very start of this call, that even though it's smaller numbers, you're going deeper with that small subset of folks, because they're getting to engage, they're getting to participate, that they don't get with the one direction of the podcast. So I want to touch on two things for about the next 10 minutes, and then save about 20 minutes for discussion, Q&A, and go from there. So Dan, James, whichever one of you guys want to take this, I want to talk a little bit about the benefit of having two hosts, just logistically, and the way that you guys have been running the format, and advice you have for folks who want to go here and maybe need to find a partner in crime or co-host for Clubhouse, and then talk a little bit about how we've been doing promotion. We talked about, the premise and the naming of our club and our room, but some of the things we've done to promote, because obviously promoting to drive to a live event on Clubhouse is a little bit different than driving to on-demand content on your podcast. So let's talk about tag teaming the co-hosting first, and then we'll talk about promotion.
Yeah. So for me, it's super, it's way more comfortable having Dan on these calls than if I were just doing them on my own. One, he's more of a subject matter expert when it comes to marketing than I am. And so just having, if you're the marketer in a company that sells to IT folks, if you can have somebody in IT from your company, like an SME from your organization, be a part of these, it might make you feel way more comfortable, like it does for me. And so I know that if a guest or if somebody asks a question, they come on stage and ask a question that I just don't have the expertise to be able to answer myself, knowing that I've got Dan to come in and be able to speak into that is super helpful. But then just from a logistics standpoint, like I mentioned earlier, when one of us is talking, the other one can be pinging people into the room, or, dealing with, the technical nuances of figuring out the recording with the second phone. And the other one can focus on moderating the conversation. I've just found that the conversations move a lot more smoothly whenever there are two folks kind of guiding it. So if I run out of questions to ask a particular guest, I know that Dan's gonna have something that's gonna be a thoughtful way of progressing the conversation along. So I've just found, and it's just been more fun. I mean, for me personally, to have Dan on there. Would you say anything different, Dan?
I think it also just fits the format of the Clubhouse. Clubhouse is made for group conversations, not just for one-on-one interviews. So I think it just makes it more conversational to have, for starters, at least 3 people in the room, and then invite other people to come up. I think it just fits the medium.
I love it, guys. Let's talk a little bit about promotion. Dan, do you want to take this one? I can bring up one of the carousel posts or slide decks that we've posted recently and talk a little bit about timing. We're doing daily, so that obviously, might not be the case for you, especially out of the gate. So maybe take some of the framework that we've laid out and what we're doing on promotion and adapt it to your own frequency and stuff like that.
Yep. So it's kind of a 3-pronged approach that we're using now. Essentially, we are promoting it on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn's kind of hard for promoting content like on the fly. It's not as fast as Twitter. Like, you can post something Monday morning and some people won't see it until Tuesday afternoon. So it's kind of hard to promote daily. So what we're doing is, like James has up this, we're posting these decks and we're posting them once a week. And then it kind of promotes like the whole week's worth of content, kind of like your old school TV guides, right? But now it's a Clubhouse guide. And that way, whenever you find it, that it's probably good. Some of it was now, some of it was upcoming. So it kind of works that way. It gives content. And I've seen our I've seen a lot of our guests actually take a screenshot of their section and then promote it themselves. So it kind of gives them content to go off of. And so that's one level of promotion we're doing. The second level is just promoting it within the actual Clubhouse room, knowing that it's going to be on the podcast. So people are listening to the podcast, and if they're wondering like, oh, I wonder how I can do a live question. Well, now you know. We're doing this recording on Clubhouse. So we're kind of promoting it right there in the episode. So the people later who are listening to it, they're going to be able to hear it and know if they want to get in on it. Hey, it's noon Eastern Standard Time almost every day. So they can show up and jump in. And then the last point of marketing we're doing is like once the episode goes live, I'm posting a LinkedIn update summarizing the individual episode, saying like, hey, check out the recording to the Clubhouse. We recorded this on Clubhouse Live. If you want to join a future Clubhouse session, again, it's Eastern Standard Time, B2B Growth Clubhouse, right? So that there's 3 different points where people can kind of discover what we're doing on Clubhouse. And of course, it can come organically in Clubhouse just from the SEO name, people searching B2B, it comes up too. So that's kind of the 3 ways that we're currently promoting it. And it's slow and steady growth. It's not like we've done a major push to it at all, especially as we're like still figuring it out. We're still refining the system in the process.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to get into, speaking of engagement and interaction, see what questions people have, that sort of stuff. Joe, I want to bring you up on stage to borrow a term from Clubhouse. I know you and the Gorilla 76 team have been experimenting and doing some things on Clubhouse. So would love to hear your context on what have you guys been doing, what's been working well, any sort of feedback for the group too.
Sure. Yeah. So just for a little context, I co-own an industrial marketing agency. We work with manufacturers, about a 20-person firm. And so we have a very, very tight niche, a very specific audience we're serving. And so we, it was like, I don't know, probably 5 weeks ago or something. It was like Friday night, I was laying in bed and then I saw all these clubs start popping up and when they opened it up to let people start creating their own clubs. So I'm immediately like racking my brain on what do I want to name this? And same thing you guys kind of talked about earlier. My podcast is The Manufacturing Executive, which Dan Sanchez made me name it, and I have no regrets. And then I've debated just going with the same name. I wound up choosing Manufacturing Growth Club for ours though. Because I think I wanted to appeal to, I kept thinking about who's the audience. And I think there was going to be more marketing and salespeople than like executives probably for this platform. So I named it accordingly. But basically the way we've been doing it, like I love that you guys are doing marketing at Noon Room and you're doing it daily, and that consistency is probably going to, come with a snowballing audience. For us, I just kind of looked at like, what can we reasonably pull off here and be able to promote? And we said, let's do one specific event every week. And let's go get experts from the manufacturing space who can talk about different things and bring them in. So like a couple weeks ago, one of the things I hear all the time from every manufacturing organization we consult is like, it's the labor shortage in manufacturing right now is so real. And like the general public's perception of automation and robotics is that like those things are taking jobs from people. And the reality is manufacturers can't hire people to do the dirty work, to work third shifts and all this stuff. So we said, all right, this is a great topic. This is going to resonate with so many people. So I went and got Patrick O'Reilly, who is the, there you go. If you scroll down a little, Logan, you'll see the, scroll down, if you keep going a little bit, but you'll see the promo graphic for that one coming up pretty quickly. There you go, right there. So combating the manufacturing labor shortage. So we ran this event. I used this graphic. We got Patrick O'Reilly, who's president of Factory Fix, which is like essentially a staffing agency for like frontline manufacturing people, to come talk about his experience on this front. He was also a previous podcast guest of mine, so I kind of knew what topics to dive into. And then Jay over there on the right was from a search firm in manufacturing. So I guess the point is, I just moderated. I don't know. I'm not an expert on this topic, but like for my podcast, I went and got experts and I just facilitated a conversation. I came in with like, if you click see more there on that post, Logan, I had like 3 or 4 talking points, those little gear emojis. Those were the talking points. So I came in with some structure. We promoted the event. And then I just moderated a conversation and let them talk, and it ran for 80, 90 minutes. Like we had probably 30 people pop in and out, which isn't huge, but it was very niche. I had two of my prospects that were there for 80 straight minutes. One of them has hired us since. So like, that's sort of the value for me. We're doing one tomorrow afternoon on using CAD files as marketing tools. And I got two experts on that. We're also previous podcast guests of mine, Nick and Adam, who you see there. So that's what we're doing. We're just one really focused event every week.
Is it just me, or does this guy kind of look like Tim Tebow as you scroll past? That was just what stood out to me. Tell Andrew I said that. Whether I don't know. If
I will do that. I don't know how he'll react, but we'll see.
Yeah, Tim Tebow is definitely a controversial figure out here in Denver. Anyway, I digress. But I want to call out something that Joe just said there. In a strategy, everybody on this call has heard us talk about your B2B podcast is a double-edged sword. There is the reach, there is the content, there is the thought leadership, but then there is the relationships, right? If at least half, if not more, of your guests regularly that you're featuring on your podcast are prospects or customers where you want to deepen that relationship, maybe there's expansion opportunities, go invite them and say, hey, let's do a Clubhouse room on the same topic you did on the podcast. It's very natural. If their episode was great, the Clubhouse is going to be great. If their episode wasn't great, you probably now know how to make it better the second time around, and you get to feature them again, all the same benefits of that first content collaboration on the podcast, but now the snowballing effect. So I wanted to make sure we talked a lot about how do you build an audience and a new platform. Let's not skip over the fact that there is a great way to use this as a content-based networking play with your guests that are strategic relationships, to feature them as the co-hosts in your Clubhouse rooms as well.
I'll also reiterate something that Joe mentioned, that having 30 people in a room is fantastic. By the way, Joe, that I don't think we've cracked 25. So if you had 30 consistently, that's awesome. But just like Joe had a couple potential customers staying on the line for 80 to 90 minutes, I found the same thing to be true. So for us, if it's a room with 10 or 15 people in it, but I can see that there are 2 or 3 VPs of marketing, and they're listening to what we have to say, they're engaged, they're coming up on stage, that's a huge win for us. We're going deeper with the relationship instead of always thinking about width, which I know is where my brain wants to go. I want to go wide and I want a bigger audience. But something I found with Clubhouse is it does allow you to go it does allow you to go deep. And that's awesome, Joe, that one of those people ended up turning into a customer.
One build there real quick is the other thing. I'm also a huge advocate of the webinar medium, and I have a lot of strong opinions about it. But when you do a joint webinar though, I have clients in manufacturing space. I have a couple coming up who one's going to do one with Rockwell Automation, another with Fanuc. These are the biggest names in manufacturing, just because they know a salespeople there, and or they know a sales professional there who would do it with them. I think the same goes here. That's why I said, well, let's go get Patrick O'Reilly and Jay Vinyard, because these guys have massive audiences in manufacturing. So you're doing the joint event with somebody who's an influencer in your space. Now you're cross-pollinating audiences. And that, I don't think I would have drawn 30 people, James, without having leveraged their audiences and networks too. So I think that's a benefit for everybody.
Yeah.
It's so good. I appreciate you sharing, Joe. Anybody else? I want to open it up. Anybody else have experience with Clubhouse or questions, especially questions that we can answer, since Dan and James have really been doing a lot of experimenting, testing, and trying stuff out at a high volume lately. So want to open it up while we've got you live for some Q&A.
Well, I have had some great experiences on Clubhouse. It's just been a really great, kind of echoing what you said, Logan, a great place to network. And a lot of people on Clubhouse are also on LinkedIn. So, you find those connections, and it's definitely a professional space, but just for your own personal, likes or dislikes or whatever, there's literally a club on there for everything. So I think that it's an awesome platform. It's still brand new. Some people are leveraging their invitations. So you have to be careful. I've seen people like selling invitations, like it's crazy. But if you have an invitation, I've found it's a great way to network with people. Just saying, posting on LinkedIn, hey, I have a few Clubhouse invitations if anybody wants to, use one or anything like that. And that's been a way for me to connect with people too.
Yeah, those posts, whenever I say I've got 6 invites to Clubhouse, always end up getting way more engagement. That's a great point, Jay. Anybody else have any questions?
I got one. What have you guys found? Like you're obviously hosting your own events that Sweetfish is sort of putting on. I had somebody advise me, like there's somebody in the manufacturing space again who has a club that's doing really well. It's called Industry 4.0 Club. If anything, you guys should just go check out to see what they're doing. They're doing it really well, like promoting this group and getting people engaged. So it's just something to emulate. But somebody in that group kind of said what I've found is if you can find other people with complementary clubs and sort of travel in packs and attend each other's events, it tends to be, again, a good way to sort of cross-pollinate. So I was just kind of curious if you guys, Dan, Logan, James, if you guys have been participating in other people's events as a way to, kind of cross-promote, your room.
I have one thing in the works right now. So if a lot of people on this call probably follow Chris Walker on LinkedIn, got an agency, Refine Labs. They're very complimentary and take a very similar approach to us when it comes to content and demand gen. And their chief customer officer, Megan Bowen, I've had on the podcast. We actually chat pretty regularly about customer experience stuff. We're going to host a room on customer experience coming soon. And so just finding those folks that are like-minded, that, maybe they don't have a larger audience than you, but they have a very similar audience, or maybe they do, right? It's where can you find that opportunity for collaboration? Because it's same thing, on LinkedIn that we say on podcasts. Find other podcasts in your space that are reaching the same audience. Because if you reach that audience, they've already said, this is content that's interesting to me, and I listen to podcasts. So the same thing carries over with Clubhouse. If you can find folks that are, as we say, you're going to go further, faster together than you're going to go alone. And that holds true in Clubhouse too.
I haven't found, Joe, a lot of other folks playing in the B2B marketing space that are consistently producing content on Clubhouse yet. Even the rooms and stuff that I've followed, I'm just not, partially probably because the hallway and discoverability of rooms sucks on Clubhouse still. But I haven't found a lot of folks to do it. So we've just been kind of going, there's been a couple of people that I've asked to, hey, you want to join a room with us? And they're literally signing up for the platform like a day before. So I could probably do more research and be more diligent in finding folks that are more active on the platform to do more of what you're sharing, but I haven't done it yet. Dan, have you noticed anybody swimming in the space we're swimming in that's active there?
I haven't, and it's because I'm not even looking. I definitely see the work that we're doing on Clubhouse is to be an add-on to the podcast more than as a full-fledged effort to hit Clubhouse as hard as we can. We have other efforts that we're going all in on. SEO and blogging is one, even though we're podcasting, and just doubling down on LinkedIn and podcasting, since those are what's working well for us. Can only go all in on activating as many channels as you can, or a few channels at a time. And Clubhouse is one that I'm trying to take advantage of, but really I'm trying to do it without spending new time. I'm trying to just double dip what we would have already done with B2B growth and get the most out of the trend or what could be a trend or the fad if it's short-lived, learning about it. So if I were trying to push hard on Clubhouse, I definitely would have searched, and I'd probably be showing up to a lot more other people's rooms and just showing up to ask questions and be a guest, just to even build my own personal following. But I haven't done that because right now we're just other places to focus.
Thanks for asking that question though, Joe. It definitely got me thinking that I could be doing more of that for sure. Logan, anything else that you wanted to cover if we don't have any questions from anybody else?
I think that was it. Dan's got something else. Go for it, dude.
I was going to say, the thing I love most about Clubhouse, if it weren't so hard to record, is that it really does give a whole different aspect to your podcast. Even if it's just one episode out of a mix of episodes that you have, having an ability for your audience to show up and listen live and actually come and ask questions, like podcasting's kind of needed this platform. There's been sources and ways of doing it that are way more complicated and technical with like live webinars and recapturing that and convert it into a podcast. But to have it built into its own like little social network app is just fantastic. I feel like Clubhouse is a gift to podcasters because I think podcasting is sorely lacked in engagement. It's not like I can, other than leaving a review and like leaving a review for the whole podcast, I can't engage with other episodes. It's kind of like an engagement-less channel platform. So this adds a way to do it that I think is the best I've seen so far.
Yeah, it's why I'm really excited about it.
And even if the recording isn't possible for you right now, just baking it into your process to where, hey, you have a guest on and you want to be able to continue that relationship and just saying, hey, let's get together after you finish the episode and let's do a Clubhouse room and we'll do it on a similar topic, and baking that into your process. And then, promoting it from the podcast. Hey, so-and-so and I are wrapping up this conversation. We're actually going to chat live on this so that we can get some live engagement and Q&A on Clubhouse at this time. Take a little bit of planning, but that's not even necessarily something we've implemented. But just as I'm thinking through, how could you bake it into the relationship building with the guests and do it without a ton of extra lift? That might be something, and have some standard structure to give people, a place to ask questions, to follow up on some of your best episodes with some of your strongest guests. All right. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap a few minutes early. I appreciate everybody showing up. We'll send out the recording of this as usual. You can also subscribe to our Customer Masterminds playlist on the Sweetfish Media YouTube channel. If you're looking for our YouTube channel, make sure you search Sweetfish Media on YouTube, because if you just search Sweetfish, you get a lot of recipes and weird stuff. So if you search Sweetfish Media on YouTube, there's a playlist for all of these monthly customer masterminds. If you want to go back, check out other ones, or just get notified when the recording is there, just hit subscribe on that channel. I feel like my YouTube plug for like hit the bell, hit the like. I'm definitely not in that mode. Obviously not a YouTuber, but you can find that there in addition to being here last Tuesday of every month live. Appreciate everybody. Joe, thanks for contributing. Everybody, thanks for your questions and comments and everything. Hope you found this useful, and enjoy the rest of your week.